Alaska, the land of the midnight sun. A land of incredible vistas. If you are a native Alaskan child, you are 7 times more likely to be taken into custody in the child welfare system than non-native children. The Western and Pacific Child Welfare Implementation Center project is designed to reduce the disproportionate number of Alaskan Native children that come into the child welfare system in the state of Alaska. The goals of the project are to improve child safety, to reduce out-of-home care, to enhance the tribal capacity to provide child welfare services, and to reduce tribal disproportionality in child welfare. In this series, you will hear from our leaders, tribal participants, the state participants, community stakeholders, youth, and the implementation team, talking about their vision, their strategies, and the successes that we've had along the way. Each one of these videos will address a different part of this work and tell the story of what's happening in Alaska.
Historic trauma is when things happen to a community or to a culture that disrupts a whole lifestyle or disrupts family interactions, and that the pain and trauma of that is transferred from generation to generation. Some communities had very little contact with outside communities, and the things like the oil pipeline and rapid settlement of Alaska really changed that, and so much more exposure. Interruption of the economy, the subsistence lifestyle that people have has been interrupted.
I always thought of historical trauma as being something a long time ago, that it really, really was a long time ago, and that it's so much more recent in Alaskan history than I realized, and I didn't give credit to the recent trauma that tribal members have lived and experienced in their own generation, with their parents, and even with their children today. And so it was very eye-opening and terribly depressing and frightening when I learned how current historical trauma is.
Here are some personal experiences that help us understand.
My Uncle Jack's, his father told him to go out and get a moose for the family, and he had been away at a boarding school for the whole winter. He went out and he saw 3 moose and shot all 3 at the same time, and because he got so excited about it, and was severely punished for doing that because it was like a waste of food, and it was a lot of work for the whole village to try to salvage all 3 moose. It's like you forgot how to live as a native because of all the trauma that you put through there.
A story in the 50s. My aunt that passed away a couple of years ago, she was a young girl in Anchorage, and she went into an ice cream shop on 4th or 5th Avenue, and they wouldn't serve her. She wanted an ice cream. It was a hot summer day, and they wouldn't serve her. Now, during that time, there was signs on many of the doors in Anchorage that said, no dogs, Puerto Ricans, or natives allowed. We've had to deal with that all of our lives. Going to school, we were the dirty, rotten little Indians from Chickaloo. We were the only Indians in the whole school.
I have a friend who is Yupik, and she went to a boarding school, and she was very young. They told her that cleanliness was next to godliness, in institutions you do have to be careful, and all she did was clean, and was punished for not doing it well enough. Then when she went home, it was so ingrained in her, and she went home to a hut with dirt floors kept trying to clean him. Her mom said she was crazy. What's wrong with you? You know, and she's like, she was crying, and she said, you know, I could never get those floors clean, you know, and I couldn't make my mom happy. And on top of that, she said, I didn't learn how to preserve food. I didn't learn how to gather berries. I didn't learn how to raise children. I didn't know how to be New Pick. And she said, then I would go to school and I wasn't white, so I wasn't good either. And so it just destroyed her whole self-concept in that process.
There's cases where our children were moved and went back east to Carlisle School. There is a lot of history there in Southeast. You've had a lot of our families that went to boarding school or institutions. Is what did that do to the family structure at that point? So in some families adapted to that and others didn't. But again, it had an impact on families. So what impact did that have? And particularly what we heard from in our workshop was when those decisions were made, there was a lot of grief, pain that was never dealt with, never processed. And in that pain, you see the 10% of the anger, but what are those underlying feelings? So then you also saw a large, over time, families being disrupted because of and children being removed in adoption. And we still are seeing a lot of adoptions happening outside of the tribe.
And I also think that OCS has taken that historical trauma in some ways in our minds, at least, and brought it to today. By removing children, saying, you know, this isn't a good environment for children and we're taking them away, we're going to, you know, some military family's going to adopt your kid, you know, and take them to the lower 48, those kinds of things. I think in a lot of Native people's minds, it's still going on today through OCS and through schools.
You have a situation in which a community can't exercise its own authority to protect its own children and has to have the state come in. And the state insists that they're the only ones who have the right to investigate child abuse and neglect in the state. And their solution, historically and to some extent still currently, is then to remove that child from that village, taking them to someplace, usually an urban center, hundreds of miles away, a plane ride away, and so that visitation is almost impossible. So that the state services really become the perpetrator of more harm, more trauma on families and on communities.
Despite historic differences, tribes in the state are now working together. With help from WPIC, tribal-state relations are making progress and looking forward to greater results in the future.
Our work really is around empowering tribal people to what we call deny the lies of that colonial influence that says you're not capable of taking care of yourself or your own children, and reasserting that yes, we are capable people.
The state needs to be more open-minded about looking to the tribes as that resource for our families and tribal systems as a way to support families. And do I think the state should be providing those services? No. I think we need to better define the role of OCS, which is Office of Children's Services, and better define the role of the tribes. And what do those roles look like, be clear in how we approach child welfare.
With these goals in mind, key strategies are being emphasized to make meaningful progress.
I think one of the things that we've done with WPIC that's been successful in addressing historical trauma is the courageous conversations that we're having.
Yes.
And I could not facilitate those. It takes a Native facilitator being able to really have the difficult, hard questions that Terry brings to this, and being able to facilitate those conversations and to get the honest, raw, kind of in your gut answer and honest dialogue between us.
All these years, we have had courageous conversations about institutional racism and the importance of children in the foster care system, knowing who they are, and the value of authentic partnerships between the state and tribes.
The only way past these things is really dialogue, it's engagement in a relationship, learning about each other, rather than to jump to conclusion about people's behavior, to be able to ask good questions and not to assume that an emotional response is an out-of-control response, but to learn diffusing skills, to learn to ask questions like, what happened to you?
And the other piece that we went through in our historical trauma project was to really have our workers do I call it a trauma tree, where unless our workers can help ourselves, how do we help others? So we really focus on our staff going through this historical trauma project and identifying on a tree what traumas could they identify, and it was incredible for them to articulate that, and that many of the other staff experienced some of the same unresolved grief and historical trauma.
Through continued collaboration, communication, and understanding among tribal and state partners, and by focusing on common goals, great progress has been achieved thus far for children and families of Alaska.
I think what we've seen, and I think in the WPIC work as well as the work disproportionality prior to WPIC, I think we've really worked on ways to honor and respect each other's where we're at, and honor and respect who we are culturally as well as our the respective agencies that we represent, whether you're the state or the tribal agency that you work for, who you represent.
It's helping people believe in themselves again and standing up for their own rights and the rights of their children and families.